Thank goodness for people to keep you honest. This is the third of our series of 10 webinars, and as we talked about last week, and for any of you who are new, our goal in these is to make sure that you're continuing to leverage your investment in the GP Dynamics software, in your staff, and to let you plan effectively for your business. This is the second of our series that have focused specifically on the user experience. And before we get going with the new material, first an apology. One of the things that I didn't discuss last week, and I should have, is that many of the user experience things we talked about in terms of leveraging your home page and making GP work for you more effectively and more streamlined are actually also available on GP 2010. So although the things are there to take advantage of when you go to GP 2013, if you saw something that you were interested in and you think you could use help implementing and you're on 2010, there may be some things we can do even now to help make your users' lives as easy and efficient as possible. So again, feel free to call us. There's lots of ways to get in touch with us, and we'd be happy to speak to you about that. The usual housekeeping, you're all on listen-only mode until the end. We're recording this, especially now that I got the reminder to start the recording. And we'll be posting this on YouTube and on our website, so if you're not able to stay for the whole time, or if you think this is something that a colleague or an acquaintance should take a look at, feel free to share it with them. We are presenting information as best we know it. If you find any errors or omissions or mistakes, we're always ready to try to learn and correct things, so feel free to let us know. And we do ask that you hold all the questions until the end. We got lots of great questions last time, and that was really fun. So with that, we will continue forward. This part of the user experience is really it's going to be less show and tell than last time. In fact, there's going to be no direct show and tell. A lot of it is informational. What we want to do is we want to talk to you about some of the big changes in deployment that are afoot, and first and foremost of those, I think, is that GP 2013 includes the first web client. So we want to talk really about that web client, what's coming, why do I care, and the good, the bad, and the evolving. Okay? So a lot of this is going to be more in the realm of informational. So what's a web client? Okay, the client is typically the portion of the software that's used by the actual user, and it provides, sort of their interface to all the additional codes and routines and processing and all that kind of stuff. So a web client now means that there's a browser-based way to access Dynamics GP. Okay? The web client has been designed from the ground up to be the same as the desktop client, and that is important because we all know that anytime people get used to doing things and you change how they need to do their work, that can be a bit of a disruption. So the look and feel is largely the same as the GP that we've all come to know and love and are familiar with. There are some limitations to the initial deployment of the web client, and we'll give you some more details about that. But the other thing that has an impact on many people who are GP users is the fact that the web client is a secure way for you to access GP remotely. Okay, a lot of times, and this is getting into network stuff, which is definitely not my strong suit, but when you're sitting in your office, the security of being in the office means that you're inside the firewall, you're connected, you don't have to worry about outsiders. But now if you're 3 states away and trying to access GP, obviously there's a need to make sure that that can be done in a way that protects your business data and is secure. So the web client uses Windows authentication, and it also introduces some additional security measures, the technical terminology, secure sockets layer, HTTPS, and that does have some implications for you and your organization as GP users. I want to sort of place the conversation that we're going to have today in the current context because, you know, this is a new introduction and things are and will continue to change. I think that, you know, there's been a lot of conversation going on in the broader world about the cloud, and, you know, I think that there is more and more evidence that we're all going to be on the cloud someday, at least for some functions. One of the things that Microsoft is also has introduced and is now starting to deploy is Office 365. So, you know, your Office suite of PowerPoint, of Excel, of Word, even Visio, depending on the level of Office that you're using, you don't necessarily have to have that installed on a box that's in your office anymore. You can put it in the cloud. Well, the same thing with GP. I don't know about you guys, but I've used TurboTax for many years, and this time I actually used their sort of cloud version. I didn't even save anything. I saved the forms, but all the data was stored somewhere in the cloud. So I think that there's probably a lot less doubt than there was even a couple of years ago that we're all heading for the cloud someday, and I'm pretty sure that cloud revenue is as much a part of Microsoft's, you know, strategic direction as the software and the operating system. So I guess part of the current context is just to recognize that this change is coming. And again, you know, thanks to my colleagues at the JSTAR group, where you are today in terms of how you're deploying your software and specifically how you're deploying GP may not be broken, but, you know, maybe you should start thinking about how and when you're going to replace it, because I suspect that someday you will have to for one or more reasons. So we're trying to share some information about where things are and let you start to think about the pros and cons and encourage you to think forward and plan for these changes rather than have them hit you without you having thought about it. Now, you've probably heard the term leading edge, and anybody who works with technology has probably also heard the term bleeding edge. And we as an organization, for example, when new releases come, we don't necessarily encourage people to be the very first person that brings them on board unless there's a compelling reason, because obviously technology is complex, and sometimes it's good to let things shake out a little bit. So with the introduction of the web client, it's certainly fair to say that there are some new and different technology layers that are going to be involved in your organization's deployment of Microsoft Dynamics GP, and that brings with it certain implications. I am not a technology person, and so I am not going to even begin to explain all of the things that are on these slides. And these came from the program that I attended out in Fargo. And my point is just to say that anytime you make a change in technology, and especially with all the changes that we've been seeing here, there's going to be implications. So, you know, you need to choose the appropriate time for your organization to start deploying the web client, and you need to be aware of some of the impacts of some of these changes. And that's really my whole point. There's nothing, you know, there's nothing good or bad about these things, and I have no doubt that we will get there, but you know, you need to pick the right time for your organization. So certainly there are now some new and different hardware requirements that come into play with GP 2013 in general, regardless of how it's deployed, and with the web client in particular. We also talked about the fact that it's been designed to provide you with a secure way to access GP even when you're working remotely. And that's a very good thing, but of course that means that there are also impacts just from that. In order to make things secure, typically one of the underlying technology approaches that's used are security certificates. That's the difference between going on to a website that has an internet address that's an HTTP address versus an HTTPS address. Usually when it's an S address, you need to have a password, you need to have a logon, You need to be somehow confirmed that you're valid to go into this site, and one of the underlying tools that's used to manage that are security certificates. Security certificates have costs. You can buy one for a shorter term. You can work with a security certificate company. Again, these are networking and technology issues that I am absolutely not qualified to speak of, but it doesn't mean that you don't need to be aware of them and to be planning for them. So the bottom line is that there can be some additional costs and requirements and management to if you're going to deploy the Microsoft Dynamics GP web client. Okay? One thing I'm going to put in as a small plug, I guess, is that the person who helped me develop this presentation was Ankur Patel, and I introduced Ankur the last time. He is really our systems engineer person. So if you have concerns about some of the more technical aspects of this, give us a call, get your network guy involved, and we can get them talking together, because they're really the ones to sort of work out all of the details about deploying the web client. At this point, I just want you to be aware of what some of the considerations are. Okay? The last thing to think about is that Microsoft Dynamics is a very, very strong, robust, successful, and widely deployed product. So for Microsoft, as with any software company, when you're starting out to make a change to a product that has a large install base, that has its own dilemmas. You certainly don't want to destroy the ability of the goose to continue to lay golden eggs, but you don't want to do anything to the eggs that are already out there. So the way Microsoft has addressed this issue, and I think it's a very, very good approach, is that the web client is being rolled out in a gradual fashion. Okay? And this is really just to give you a sense of the phasing. And so this is important for you to understand, because depending on the particular modules that your organization is using, you may or may not be able to take advantage of the web client right away, or you may be able to only take advantage of the web client in certain parts of your organization, but not others. So this is just a roadmap of what's coming in terms of the release of the web client. Makes sense in terms of what you would expect. Starting with financials and distribution, which I think is where a lot of people are. Next things up are human resources and payroll, then adding in the project series, field service, and last but absolutely not least, manufacturing. Okay? So why is the release of the web client a good thing? These are, you can consider these in the light of editorial comments, I suppose. You may have your own feelings about this, but from our perspective in working with our clients, some of the underlying technology and architecture is going to allow various organizations that actually provide hosting services for GP to be able to do that more efficiently and more effectively. And I think one of the offsets of that for every business who uses software is to really, at different points in time, think about what is your core competence as a business, and in what ways does your business benefit by being in the hardware and network business. If you're not a business whose primary value proposition to your clients is hardware and network, then there may be a point in time where it makes more sense for you not to take those things on, to find folks who can host your GP. Maybe it gets hosted in the cloud, and that's all part of this web client to allow that to happen more efficiently and more effectively. I had come from about 25 plus years in the ERP business, and there are folks who have been thinking about software as a service for a long time. This has a very similar feel to it in terms of some of the directions. And again, let your business be about what your business is about, and if it doesn't make sense for you to have to to understand and manage the hardware and the network aspects of supporting your business, perhaps those may need to be outsourced. And that's part of this change that the technology is going to allow it to happen more easily. Although the look and feel, particularly in the first release of the web client, is exactly what you would expect, they are starting to mix into the, or place in the mix some of the approaches that are more common in some of the other Microsoft products, so that eventually Excel is going to look like GP, is going to look like PowerPoint, is going to look like Word, is going to look like, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the web client does take advantage of some of the familiar approaches that you have with other products that have been really built around desktops. No menus, Windows ribbons, tabs, status bar indicators. So again, that's a good thing, and it will come over time, but it will make not only all aspects of GP more accessible, but make it more like other products that you may be using. Again, I think that as a business, you need to think about how you are going to grow and prosper in the coming years. And the fact that there's now a level of support for a remote and mobile workforce is, for many, many businesses, in and of itself, a very good thing. If you're an organization that makes use of a lot of approvals, workflow, and you've got folks who are flying all around the country, flying all around the world, now they have a way that they can get into GP securely, regardless of where they are and what time zone and all of that good thing. So, if somebody needs to approve something, they can. If they need to look at their home page and look at their reminders, if they want some of the dashboard access, all of that is now available to folks even as they work remotely or work more mobilely. The other thing to think about is scalability. If you have GP deployed today, you might be using a Citrix connection, a VPN connection, terminal server. Some of those things have inherent limitations in terms of what happens as you add more users to GP. And the web client can change some of the considerations for that in terms of what's going to be required if you're going to be adding 20% more staff over the next couple of years. So a lot of these topics, and I'll probably say this about 69 more times before the end of the webinar, a lot of these topics we're putting out there to give you a heads up in terms of the things you need to be thinking about so that you can do the most appropriate sort of strategic planning and thinking as you move forward in your organization's use of Microsoft Dynamics Great Plains. There aren't, there's a lot of different answers depending on the company. It is not a one-size-fits-all, but you really need to be aware of some of these impending changes so that you can plan for them. Okay? I'm making up for the fact that last time I talked too much by potentially ending a little bit early, depending on the questions. But as I look at things going forward, there's a lot of goodness. Microsoft Dynamics Great Plains is a strong product. It's alive. It's well. It's still growing. It's still developing. That's great because probably there are some of you who've been in the position of working with a software product that has died and then having to replace it. So it's good to see the continued development, investment, and growth of the product. That's a good thing for you as a business owner and a business user. Good things are coming, so plan and be prepared. Things are changing. Need to be aware of that. Need to work that into your capital budgeting, your strategic planning. Don't jump too soon, but beware of dead ends. Based on your organization, your users, your profile, your core competencies, now may be the time to really think about what is the approach that you need to take and when and how do you want to start deploying some of these new modalities, including the web client. And with that, I will be happy to take questions. It was a little bit, I'm not sure about the audio, so you can type your question into your little meeting bar, and we will go through them and type answers back. If there are things that you want to talk about more in depth, send us an email, we'll call you back, give us a call. This may be an area in particular where it may be better to go more one-on-one because the questions may be very particular to your organization. And before any questions, let me just say again, thank you for your time and attention. Hope to see you at our next session. I can't remember. I know that we will be starting with our next session on looking at some of the specific changes on a sort of series by series and module by module basis. So you can find the ones that are most relevant to you. And I really do appreciate your time and hope that everyone's looking at a sunny day like I am. And I think that's about it. So if you have any questions, feel free to type them in or get in touch with us. And thank you again. All right. Ooh, look, I already got a bunch of questions. I got a question about the time frame because of the phasing and the fact that manufacturing is at the end. I should have double-checked what the time phase is on it. We also keep a log of the questions, and so I will double-check that and get back to you and let you know what Microsoft is saying. Okay? I'm going to stop the recording.